Alright guys, so if the SD card on this GoPro didn't work again, we just lost a tire on the trailer doing our first load to get some wood back with the new ATV tires. Mind you, I mean the trailer tire. Literally came off the rim, so unfortunately lost the video, but we're gonna take that back, get a new tire, bring that back another day and hopefully fix that. But now, as I said, we're gonna go ahead and start some scouting. So we drove kind of halfway back into where stuff is a little thicker. I'm with my buddy Mike here, and we're gonna go into this thick stuff and see if we can really find any more beds and maybe even a shed if it's not too early, but let's go check it out. What's really neat is kind of going through this thick stuff and then into these little open areas and just kind of checking out what's back here. You can see past this thick stuff is a field. I've really barely come back here. There's actually a couple nice trees, but it'd be so thick it would be quite hard to get back here and not spook anything. But it's a lot of fun checking it out, seeing these old rubs. Some new ones, I'm sure. There's a little one right there. Look at all the trunks on this thing. Pretty crazy. Imagine being in a stand looking out into the field. That would be... I know, right? I don't have too many pines and cedars, but the small few that I do.
Oh,
wow. Are you regretting it yet?
A little bit.
It's not that bad unless there's thorns. Oh yeah. Just past all this stuff is really natural hardwoods and not a ton of bedding. This little circle. Oh, Mike. Do you think this could be the coyote den? No, look.
Yep.
Or some kind of den. Oh, easy, buddy. Look at that. This is right here in this corner. This is exactly where the coyotes came out, where they were playing around. I think I showed you some video, but I'll show you some now. And hanging out for literally an hour. Literally right out this 20, 30 yards. And here's that hole. So I think we literally just found the den. I knew there was one back here, but
Mark it.
This isn't the initial hole that I had seen. Very interesting. We just had a coyote go by on camera like after a half hour of being here, not too far from here. So they definitely heard us.
Some come crawling out.
I'm no coyote expert, but we're thinking it might be a tad small, especially for you know, 2 to 3 coyotes really to be around. So there is another one I know back here that we'll try and find and check that out, see if there's more fresh tracks. Go ahead. So where we're walking now is just a little bit farther in to another clearing where one of the biggest oaks we have on the property sits. And when it gets wet, it's basically almost a small pond, but when it's frozen, it's not bad, and I've definitely seen coyote tracks in here. Plus, it's just being an opening. When things are frozen, it might be beneficial to possibly cut some trees in this opening and create a little bit more bedding that way around the edges or where it's not super wet, because I think they would use this more since it's right off of this other thick stuff that we have behind me. These very few cedars, and I think a lot of these are aspens and stuff like that as well. Let's go check this out. Lots of rabbit tracks. Look at the size of that thing. The GoPro does not do it justice. Look at this. I would say that is coyote poop. And all these tracks, all these right here, these are all coyote tracks. Going right that way. Oh, there's another one? Yeah, we don't really know what made this bed. Oh yeah, there's another one there too. Yeah. You can see under the pines just some decent beds in here. But they might not all be deer as well. That one's a little small.
That's a big deer.
Yeah. So it's interesting to me walking through a lot of this thick stuff. I mean, there's tracks, don't get me wrong. Maybe a couple beds so far, and we've got a lot more to look at. But what's really interesting is that, you know, you find the occasional rub and bed, and, you know, of course they like the cover, and it looks like there might be some old beds that were right over there. But, you know, the larger amount of buck sign, rubs, you know, other scrapes and stuff, even though we really haven't even touched the surface when it comes to scouting around here. But this other sign is really more along these field edges and these different, you know, diversity types of habitat. I know we're always talking about that and hearing that from other, you know, YouTubers and habitat managers, but, you know, there's good tracks, and I love seeing all this stuff. And you can tell that was pretty thick, you know, stuff. And I guarantee you there's some beds and another sign over there I want to go look at. But right along this field edge here, I've been meaning to show you guys, but usually you accidentally use Snapchat or something to that effect and forget. So, all right, so we're coming around this corner, and pretty much immediately you can see a transition, a little opening, more thick stuff in woods, field. The food plot trail goes along there and up into the rest of the property. But look at this little entrance here. Absolutely shredded. Wait till you get over here. It's almost every tree. There's some small. And they all looked quite a bit more fresh. All these branches, look back there at that. All of that just shredded. More. And these were like blood red with a couple of scrapes that were around as well. I wish I would have showed this to you guys a little more, you know, November, December. There's another good one there, and some even kind of go up this edge. But it's just interesting because there's literally, you know, pockets of cover around, but for the most part it's, you know, on these field edges and these things that we see. So, you know, there is something to be said for the different types of habitat and the different lines, you know, pines, aspens, field edges. And in some earlier videos when I was telling you guys it was a huge mistake in that 6 mistakes from 2021 video, you know, trail cameras and where the sign is now. I didn't add this camera, you know, here until after the rut, thinking I didn't want to go into the middle of my property, and ended up being probably a pretty big mistake. But we're gonna go right over through here, check these woods out. The drainage kind of cuts this way, so it's kind of a triangle of area that's kind of separated a little bit, some thick stuff, and we did drop a lot of trees. I'll link above to the opening up the canopy video, because that was a huge section where we dropped trees. So I want to see what they've been using, if anything, up there. Coming in on this deer trail, you can see a lot of the trees that we fell last year it'll be interesting to see how much new growth, you know, comes about it after a full year of sunlight. I mean, look how much more open this is. And I know we showed you guys that in that other video. Look at how much more sunlight. This trail right into here, and we did see some beds here last year. Some kind of junk from the previous owner, but it's really not too much. Could have been a lot worse. Little shoe, huh? It's cute. Have to come back with the trailer. All the field edges, it gets a little thicker around. Oh yeah, here we go. Small bed right here, it looks like. Looks like another one right here. So they are using this. Big stuff. It's funny, I think, you know, clearing some of those trees as well also just kind of helped create a path for them to follow and guided them. And that's really what we need to be using our hinge cuts for and our other canopy, you know, canopy work, not just opening up the sunlight, but lots of different things, you know. Every tree we cut down, if we're not going to be using it for wood, you know, we want to have as much purpose as possible. And I will be going over some of that more specifically later. Here, I think there's another bed, maybe a little older, but this was actually a really big tree. Not really big, but I mean pretty big when I was first starting to use the chainsaw. This looks like a older bed right here. Oh, there's another one right there. Oh, it looks like this was a group of beds. This is probably a doe family. There's another one here. You can see all the tracks. Some pea right there. And just kind of, there's another one. Just kind of staying behind in this, another one up there, in this really thick stuff. Right off the field, the food plot trail that kind of hooks around and comes back to this thick stuff on the east side. You know, they are bedding right here, right off of it, and probably go right out to the food. Another big one. Another big one right over there. I mean, this what looks like poop. More poop. A very, very pretty heavily used area. So that I'm pretty happy to see. Look at the size of this tree right here. Man, that would take 3 people to wrap around. There's quite a few of these big oaks, but you know, really, really excited for that forester to come out and start looking at, you know, what our plan should be to open up, get some more of this thick stuff, because you can see this really thick stuff like I was talking about. And yes, there is some right here, but more off the field. It's normal hardwoods, and there's just quite a high basal area. The person from the conservation office was giving me guidance on, and really a lot of it needs to be thinned out. So excited to learn more and more and use the wood for firewood or whatever if we can. Maybe one day even have a mill. Here's another bed. And you can see the field right out there. More beds. This trail. That might be coyote poop. So hopefully they're not all coyote beds, but definitely a lot of deer poop. Big bed here. More poop. More poop. That's more fresh. This is definitely more of a fresh bed. It's a pretty heavily used area. I'm you know, quite happy with these trees that we dropped and what I'm seeing so far. That's exactly what we wanted to happen. That was right over there. There's so many good oaks, and that's the thing I was kind of mentioning to you guys is like, when you have that many oaks, you know, we should be able to let some go, especially the ones that, you know, maybe don't have a lot of value or they're non-producing, and get more sunlight to the ground, because so far I've been pretty impressed with the trees that we've dropped in this area and what it's doing. We need to make more of the farm look like this though. All right, so we just crossed the drainage and we're coming up to kind of the hinge cut trail that I have to one of the watering holes in the northeast corner. And I want to see if any deer are using this trail. So it looks like it is somewhat working. I see some prints going through, which, remember, this trail or this corridor that we made up the little hill and into the field, that should start right where the food plot trail picks up and starts to go up and circle around. So they should be kind of heading in that direction, especially when the food is in its good peaking stage. But you can see, actually, not a ton. It's not a huge highway or anything, but these are actually pretty big tracks. Yeah. To our west here, here's the hinge cut trail. You can see some of the hinges. Hopefully they live. They're not too bad. They get some sun. I know, don't get me started. We gotta thin some of this out, but not bad hinge cuts for me, and that was my first time doing it. But to the west here, a lot of that, when I talk about the 50, 60 trees that I cut, a lot of them are right over there, and I want to go see how that looks. How thick it is, if they're able to get through, how they're getting through. But a trail goes that way. Some more of the hinge cuts right here. And you can kind of tell just by the openness. Now, there was a little logging trail here, so I know it looks a little open that way, but this hinge cut trail. But they're also using that, which could be something for me to block off later, you know, if I don't want them going to the neighbor's field and we want to angle them that way more to the food plot. Maybe that's something deer poop. Maybe he was running when he pooped this time. It's pretty big track. I would think. I got some of that. I think. And yeah, so they're definitely using the trail some. And so just another 10 yards up, you can see the hinge cuts here, but you can kind of see this is their natural path they're taking, and the tracks kind of stop here. And the water hole is probably not for another 100 or so yards, so this might be something to leave and have them come this way, open up more down there, or close this off to have them circle more, but they're probably using a lot of this thick stuff that we fell. But they're definitely, Mike's right, branched off that way. And there's just rabbit tracks essentially down there to the water hole. So moving west, here we are, kind of where we were pointing, dropped quite a bit, you know, more trees back here, but you can still see, you know, with the amount of stems that we have, how much cover would still be taken up when leaves are on these trees. I mean, it would still be very, very shaded. And so it's just got to be thinned out in some form or fashion. I mean, I went to town with a chainsaw. There's no denying it. And they are still, that's a deer track, still moving through somehow. I don't know how in the world they got through that. Just a ton. Another old logging trail. When we see these, you can see the deer are still using them a little right here anyway, but that kind of open space. So if you can see Mike and some of my hinges, you can't, well, there's one there. He is on my deer corridor that we trimmed moving east and west. And here towards me, about 15 yards away, we're on this trail that's literally this deer trail that's paralleling it. And you can just see it's a pretty open, just nice trail. And I actually remember the first time I ever walked on this property, my wife and I walked right along this thick stuff, and we actually followed this trail, and the owner had a little flag on one of these. But I just started going and turned around, and look at this shredded tree. I mean, that's a good deer, and it just kind of shows you, like, you either need to close some of this off or thicken it up so that they're using the trail and it's the only way. Otherwise, they might like it a little bit closer to this nasty stuff and stick to this trail. And you got to think, I'm another 20 to 30 yards from this deer corridor, which is probably out of range for this far. So it's really helping for me to see this in the wintertime and in the snow. All right, we're basically in the northwest corner, and I was walking this trail along this thick stuff here. I got a camera in a water hole, and you can see the deer were kind of converging here, but they are still using, you know, these are a little close together in hinge, small hinge cuts, but from my water hole and camera down here and right out to the other side where the food plot trail comes all the way around and meets back at the woods right here. So they are using it, and I think there was a deer bed back there. So overall, you know, I'd say maybe not as many beds as I'd like to see. And you know, these ones that are near the food sources are most likely does. Nothing super fresh that's isolated that I could say is a buck bed, but you know, not bad. We kind of know a little bit more about what we need to do with the woods, and we'll spend another, you know, couple hours looking around and trying to see if there's any other trails we want to block off, or maybe just change to where our stands are. Stop worrying about making the deer move exactly where we want them to go and start hunting them a little better, even if it's not perfect as far as, you know, how we want things laid out on the property. All right guys, so I wanted to show you, my GoPro keeps cutting off. We have some trees that made it through. It was so thick in here in the summer we couldn't tell, but if we turn this bad boy around, we can see that, you know, out of the groups of 10, this is the second one I'm looking at. That's a nice one there. We probably have, you know, half. This one's a little better actually. Some there, here, and there that made it through. So pretty excited about that. Hopefully after another year of growth, we'll see more, but I was thinking there for a while that most of them died. And who knows? I mean, this is only a fraction of the 200 or so, but little update there. Pleasantly surprised. All right guys, well that's about it. We had fun walking around, confirmed some things, learned some new things, and always plenty to do. So we're gonna hop on the ATV, grab a couple SD cards that aren't cellular, and we'll show you if anything good pops up on those. And then on the way home, I surprisingly found a used log splitter.